How would you feel if you were guillotined for a crime you did not commit? Greetings everyone, I'm Chris. Today, we delve into the Revolutionary Tribunal, exploring the power struggles, ideals, and the infamous Reign of Terror led by Robespierre. The French Revolution marked the fall of the monarchy and the rise of a new order governed by the people's representatives, bringing immense societal upheaval and transformation. However, this seismic shift brought forth competing visions for the nation's future, resulting in a period of extreme turbulence and violence that would be etched in history as the Reign of Terror. If you find this video interesting, please support us by hitting the like button. Now, let's get started. The execution of King Louis XVI was a symbolic event that marked France's descent into an era characterized by repeated executions and widespread terror. In the late 18th century, specifically around 230 years ago, the French Revolution emerged, liberating the country from monarchical rule. Representatives of the people took charge, governing the nation through discussion. However, the representatives of the people did not all have the same ideas, and at that time there were two main forces at odds over how the country should be run. One group believed that the purpose of the revolution, to break free from the rule of the king, had already been achieved, and that further revolution should be stopped. The other group believed that the revolution should continue further, in order to achieve a thoroughly equal society. And the group that wanted to continue the revolution proposed the execution of the king. They argued that to safeguard the revolution's achievements, it must be made clear to the people that the old era had ended. The advocates for continuing the revolution argued that the act of the king ruling the country was seen as a significant crime, as if he treated the nation as his personal possession. Those advocating for the revolution believed that any actions undermining the revolution, even if to correct such governance, warranted the death penalty. The king's side, on the other hand, argued that he had done nothing to violate the rules. In Europe before the French Revolution, the assumption was that a country was only as good as its king. So the king acted with the belief that protecting his authority would eventually lead to protecting his people. It was argued that the king acted based on the prevailing norms and beliefs of his time. Although some of those who wanted to stop the revolution understood the king's argument, it did not change the will of those who wanted to continue the revolution. And as a result of the vote, the king's death sentence was confirmed. The decision was made by a margin of just one vote. 4 days after the verdict, the king was executed by guillotine in front of a large crowd. With the execution of the king, a symbol of the old society, French society could no longer turn back, and the forces that wanted to continue the revolution at any cost began to expand their influence. And such groups would eventually create a period of terror with mass executions. After the execution of the king, France had a mountain of problems to solve. Kings from neighboring countries, fearing that some would try to execute their own kings, attacked to crush the French revolutionary movement, while others were opposed to further revolution, while others were citizens who wanted an even more radical revolution and might erupt at any moment. To address both external threats and internal issues, the representatives of the French people established the Revolutionary Court, a tribunal that would send many to the guillotine. This court was primarily intended to try those opposing the revolution. However, many groups, fearing excessive suppression of dissent, opposed its creation. They believed that such oversuppression could lead to unchecked power. On the other hand, the group that wanted to continue the revolution argued that the establishment of the court would allow them to create an ideal society while maintaining order. The two sides came into great conflict. With various problems at home and abroad, the existence of France, let alone the revolution, was in jeopardy if the representatives of the people continued to squabble like this. The relatively poor citizens of France felt threatened by this situation. On June 2, 1793, an armed mob surrounded the venue where the representatives of the people were assembled. The groups that want to continue the revolution take advantage of this situation and expel the leading members of the groups that want to stop the revolution from the meeting of the delegates. Thus, there was no longer any obstacle among the representatives of the people to the group that wanted to continue the revolution. About a month later, a major event occurred that would give further impetus to the revolutionary group. On July 13, 1793, a woman came to visit a man named Mallor, who was a very influential figure in the revolutionary group. Her name was Charlotte Corday. Corday claimed she had traveled to Paris to report on a movement in her hometown that aimed to suppress the revolution. The next moment, Corday pulled out a knife. She had been hiding and stabbed Mallor in the chest. From the outset, Corday had deceitfully approached Mallor, pretending she wanted to inform on him, but her true intention was to assassinate him. Corday believed that French society was spiraling into chaos due to those persistent in continuing the revolution. She was angered by the unjust exile of those in the group who had been trying to stop the revolution and carried out the assassination of Mallor, who had been one of the most influential members of the group who wanted to continue the revolution. Corday was caught soon after the incident, tried, and executed. Corday believed that Mallor was the main culprit behind the madness in French society, and that killing Mallor would bring peace to the country. However, this perception was far off. Mallor was a man who worked with the poor more than anyone else, and was extremely popular among the people. The group that wanted to continue the revolution used Mallor's assassination as an excuse to intensify their actions, claiming that he was killed by those from the group opposing the revolution. Also, in fact, this group had a leader rather than Mallor, so that the group would not collapse when Mallor was gone. The assassination of Mallor bolstered the influence of this group, encouraging its leader, Robespierre, to push for bold reforms. Robespierre was a former lawyer who felt his life's purpose was to help the socially vulnerable. For him, the goal of the revolution was to create an ultimate peace, where all people were equal and no one was poor. However, France at this time was under constant attack from surrounding countries, and many people in France were opposed to any further revolution. If things continued as they were, the ideals envisioned by Robespierre would never be realized. Robespierre's idea was to rule through fear, specifically by thoroughly executing those who opposed the revolution. He tried to instill in the citizens the fear that they would be killed if they opposed the revolution, and to force them to unify the direction they wanted to take as a nation. At first glance, it may seem contradictory that a man who sought peace would be so aggressive in executing people. But for Robespierre, as long as the ultimate peace could be achieved, all actions taken to achieve it were justified. The rule by fear was supported by laws such as this one. All suspicious persons are to be arrested. The term suspicious person here referred to anyone who opposed the revolution and was suspected of being against it. However, the definition of this suspicious part was very vague, so this law made it possible to arrest almost anyone without any evidence. Those arrested would then be sent to the revolutionary court, where most would be sentenced, fearing that they would be considered suspicious. Ordinary citizens began to follow the rules set by Robespierre and his associates, and also to be careful about what they said and did on a daily basis. On the other hand, snitching on others to protect themselves became a widespread practice, and the number of people sent to the revolutionary court skyrocketed, with more and more innocent people being sent to the court for execution. In parallel with the executions of ordinary citizens, a series of executions of prominent people who had once been involved in the running of the country also took place. Executions of relatives of former kings and most of those who had been exiled by the people's representatives in an attempt to stop the revolution. Those who were involved in the group that tried to stop such a revolution are also executed. The rule by fear made Robespierre and his associates less and less likely to oppose him. Hedon and Robespierre gained more and more power. Soon, Robespierre and his associates found no need for justifications to send anyone to court, intensifying their reign of terror. Some citizens rebelled against this situation, but they too were put on trial and sent to the guillotine one by one. In addition, a radical group calling for even bolder reforms than Robespierre and a group that thought the revolution should proceed more slowly for the sake of social stability. Each from a different standpoint tried and executed those who criticize Robespierre's methods one after the other. Although these people were certainly opposed to Robespierre's methods, they were all aiming in the same direction, and in the larger scheme of things, they were still Robespierre's friends. By thoroughly eliminating even those people, Robespierre gradually began to isolate himself among the representatives of the people. There is no doubt that Robespierre's methods were quite radical. But in fact, the reforms that were carried out in parallel also produced certain results. First, he sent troops to the provinces to suppress the forces opposing the revolution, and enacted a law that the prices of food and daily necessities could not be raised above a certain level in order to stabilize the lives of the poor citizen. He also created a new calendar with the day of the beginning as the day on which power was taken away from the king, impressing upon the people that they were to create a completely new society, unlike any they had ever seen before. He also sent his leaders directly to the armies fighting foreign nations, and within a few months, they succeeded in largely stopping the attacks of their enemies. The reforms were controversial because they were so forceful, but as a result, France was temporarily out of a deep crisis of domestic and international problems. Originally told that the Reign of Terror was an emergency measure to get the country out of a state of emergency, many people hoped that this would be the end of the Reign of Terror. However, Robespierre took the opportunity to make further reforms, and the Reign of Terror became even more extreme. To speed up the pace of executions, Robespierre and his associates enacted a new law to simplify the trial process. This law limited the time available to examine evidence and dissent from the allegations made during a trial, and the rate of convictions increased dramatically. Furthermore, the only penalty for a guilty verdict was the death penalty, and the mere act of questioning resulted in immediate execution. Trials became a formality. The people's representatives began to fear that their turn might come at any moment. In fact, many of the representatives of the people at this time wanted to take advantage of their position to line their pockets and enjoy a little extravagance, now that they had ousted the kings and nobles and gained power. However, for Robespierre, who had devoted his entire life to the realization of an equal society, using power for his own personal gain was an unforgivable act, and such people should be the first to be eliminated. On July 27, 1794, at a meeting of the representatives of the people, an opponent of Robespierre suddenly delivered a speech, severely condemning him. During this speech, Robespierre tried to protest several times, but at this time the chairperson, who also wanted to defeat Robespierre, did not allow him to speak. The representatives of the people decided to arrest Robespierre and his associates, and took them into custody. The next day, Robespierre and his companions were executed by guillotine without trial. The executions continued for 2 more days, with a total of 105 of Robespierre's associates executed, bringing the Reign of Terror to its end. Although it would be nice to say that stability had finally returned to France with Robespierre's disappearance, French society was once again in turmoil. Many of those who overthrew Robespierre put their own interests before the interests of society, and so they devoted themselves to protecting their own position. And fortunes and corruption became widespread among the representatives of the people. In addition, those who had opposed the revolution, and those who had feared execution by Robespierre, such as the rich, began to appear in the public eye again, and French society became chaotic. A new constitution was drawn up to stabilize the post-revolutionary society. But people with various opinions clashed with each other, and the country was not well managed. If things continued as they were, public safety would deteriorate and the looming threat of the ongoing war with foreign countries intensified. In the midst of this turmoil, a figure emerged with the promise to rescue France from its crisis: Napoleon. Following this tumultuous period, France sought stability. Emerging as a beacon of hope, Napoleon led France into a period of relative calm. However, under his leadership, the nation soon found itself in expansive wars that spanned continents. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insightful content. Take care and see you in the next video. Goodbye!